I borrowed my mom's laptop and found a secret folder. Inside were holiday photos, family dinners, my sister's graduation, and many more. I was never invited. The next day, I cut them off. What happened next changed everything. I, 24M, borrowed my mom's laptop last Tuesday because mine crashed right before a work deadline. She handed it over without hesitation, telling me her password was the same as always. What I found changed everything I thought I knew about my family. I was looking for a USB port when I accidentally clicked on a folder labeled Family Memories 2020 to 2024. The cursor hovered over it for a moment before I opened it, expecting to see the usual collection of random photos we'd all taken together over the years. Instead, I found myself staring at hundreds of photos and videos of a family I didn't recognize as my own. There was my mom, dad, and sister at Christmas morning, unwrapping presents around a tree I'd never seen. My sister in a cap and gown at her college graduation, beaming as my parents flanked her with proud smiles. Birthday dinners at restaurants, weekend trips to the mountains, barbecues in our backyard where I apparently didn't exist. The timestamps showed these weren't old photos from before I was born. These were recent. Very recent. Some were from last month. I scrolled through 4 years of family gatherings, holidays, and celebrations. 4 years of my family living a completely separate life without me. In every single photo, there was a glaring absence where I should have been. No empty chair, no mention of me, no wish he was here energy. Just a complete family of 3 living their best life. My hands shook as I realized the pattern. Every major holiday I'd spent alone in my apartment, thinking they were too busy or had other plans, they were actually together. Every time my sister said she couldn't make it to my birthday because of school, she was celebrating something else with them. Every excuse, every rain check, every maybe next time had been a lie. I found videos too. Dad giving a toast at my sister's graduation party, talking about how proud he was of his amazing daughter and how grateful he was for his perfect little family. Mom laughing as she served cake, telling someone off camera about how nice it was to have just the 3 of them for once. The worst part was how happy they all looked. This wasn't some grudging obligation or forced family time. They were genuinely enjoying themselves, genuinely happy to be together. Without me, I closed the laptop and sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to process what I'd just discovered. For years of systematic exclusion. For years of being lied to about why I wasn't invited to anything. For years of believing I was part of a family that had apparently voted me out without telling me. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times I called my mom to check in, all the times I'd asked about family plans, all the times they'd made me feel like the problem for wanting to be included. I thought about my sister's graduation, which I'd found out about through a mutual friend's social media post. When I'd asked her about it, she'd said it was just a small ceremony with no celebration after. The photos showed a party for 50 people. I thought about last Christmas, when they told me they were keeping it low-key this year, and maybe we'd do something in January instead. The photos showed a full Christmas morning with stockings, a massive tree, and what looked like enough presents to stock a small store. I thought about my birthday last month, when they'd all been too busy to celebrate with me. The timestamp on one of the mountain trip photos showed they'd been together that exact weekend, hiking and having what looked like an amazing time. By morning, I made my decision. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't ask for explanations or give them a chance to lie to me again. I blocked all 3 of them on everything: phone, social media, email, everything. Then I changed my own phone number and moved apartments within 2 weeks. I told my landlord I had a family emergency and needed to break my lease early. Technically, it wasn't a lie. I told my job I needed to relocate for personal reasons and asked to transfer to our branch in another city. They approved it immediately. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a message. I just disappeared from their lives the same way they'd made me disappear from theirs. For 3 months, I heard nothing. Part of me wondered if they'd even noticed I was gone, or if they were just relieved they didn't have to make excuses anymore. Then my phone started ringing. My new number was unlisted, but somehow my mom had tracked it down. She called 17 times in one day. When I didn't answer, she started calling my work. When that didn't work, she showed up at my old apartment and harassed my former neighbors until someone told her I'd moved. She found my new address through what I can only assume was some serious detective work or possibly illegal means. I came home from work one day to find her sitting on my doorstep, crying. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in weeks. She started talking the moment she saw me, telling me how worried they'd all been, how they'd been looking for me everywhere, how they couldn't understand why I'd just vanished. I told her I knew about the photos. I told her I'd seen everything, all 4 years of their secret family life. I told her I knew about every lie, every excuse, every time they'd chosen to exclude me and then lied about why. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't surprise or confusion. It was the look of someone who'd been caught. She tried to explain. She said it had started small, just a few times when they'd made plans and forgot to include me. She said they'd felt bad about it, but didn't know how to bring it up. She said it had snowballed from there, and before they knew it, it had become a pattern they didn't know how to break. I asked her why. Why exclude me? Why lie? Why make me feel like I was the problem for wanting to be part of my own family? She couldn't give me a real answer. She talked about how I'd always been different, how I'd never quite fit in with their dynamic, how sometimes it was just easier when it was the three of them. She said they'd never meant to hurt me, they'd just gotten used to doing things without me. I told her that was exactly the problem. They'd gotten used to me not being there. They'd gotten comfortable with my absence. They'd built a family that functioned better without me in it, and then they'd lied to my face about it for 4 years. She begged me to come home. She said they could fix this, they could start over, they could include me in everything from now on. She said she'd delete all the photos. They'd never have another family gathering without me. They'd make it right. I told her it was too late for that. You can't unring a bell. You can't unsee 4 years of evidence that your family is happier without you. You can't unfeel the pain of discovering that the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally have been systematically excluding you from their lives and lying about it. She left crying, but she didn't give up. None of them did. Update 1. My sister showed up next. She'd driven 6 hours to get to my city, and she looked almost as bad as my mom had. She'd been crying, and she kept apologizing over and over, saying she'd never meant for it to go this far. She told me the truth about how it had started. Apparently, it began during my sophomore year of college when I'd been going through a rough patch and had been, in her words, kind of a downer at family events. She said I'd been negative and complaining a lot, and it had made everyone uncomfortable. So they'd started having smaller gatherings without me. Just for the fun events, she said. They'd still include me in the important stuff. Except that line had kept moving. First it was just casual dinners. Then it was birthday celebrations. Then holidays. Then graduations. Eventually, I was only included in things like funerals or when they needed something from me. She said she'd felt guilty about it the whole time, but she'd never known how to bring it up. She said every time she'd considered telling me, too much time had passed, and it would have been too awkward to explain. I asked her about her graduation. She'd looked me in the eye and told me it was just a small ceremony with no party. She'd hugged me and said she wished I could be there, but understood why I couldn't make the drive for something so small. She broke down completely when I brought that up. She said she'd wanted to invite me, but by then the pattern was so established that including me would have felt weird. She said everyone would have asked questions about why I was suddenly there after being absent for so long. So instead of dealing with that awkwardness, she'd chosen to lie to me and let me miss one of the biggest days of her life. I told her that was the most selfish thing I'd ever heard. She'd prioritized her own comfort over having her brother at her graduation. She'd chosen to protect herself from awkward questions rather than include me in her family. She begged me to forgive her. She said she'd been young and stupid, that she'd followed my parents' lead without thinking about how it would affect me. She said she missed me and wanted her brother back. I told her she'd never had a brother. She'd had a family member she occasionally tolerated when it was convenient and excluded when it wasn't. That's not the same thing. She left, but like my mom, she didn't stop trying. Update 2. My dad was the last one to show up, and his approach was completely different. He didn't cry or beg or apologize. He was angry. He told me I was being dramatic and childish. He said families go through rough patches, and instead of working through it like an adult, I'd run away like a teenager. He said I was punishing them for something that wasn't even that big of a deal. I showed him some of the photos I'd saved on my phone before blocking them. I showed him the Christmas morning photos, the graduation party, the birthday dinners, the family trips. I asked him to explain how 4 years of systematic exclusion wasn't that big of a deal. He got defensive. He said I'd been difficult during college, that I brought negative energy to family events, that sometimes they just wanted to have peaceful gatherings without drama. He said they'd tried to include me, but I'd always found something to complain about. I asked him for specific examples. He couldn't give me any. I asked him to explain the lies. Why not just tell me I wasn't invited instead of making up elaborate excuses? Why make me think they were too busy or that events weren't happening when they were actually happening without me? He said they'd been trying to spare my feelings. They thought it would be easier for me if I didn't know what I was missing. I told him that was the most condescending thing I'd ever heard. They decided I was too fragile to handle the truth. So they'd lied to me for 4 years and let me believe I was part of a family that had actually written me out of their story. He said I was overreacting. He said every family has problems, and I was making this bigger than it needed to be. He said if I'd just come home, we could all move past this and start fresh. I asked him if he'd delete all the photos, if he'd acknowledge that what they'd done was wrong, if he'd take responsibility for 4 years of lies and exclusion. He said he wasn't going to delete family memories just because I was upset about not being in them. He said those were good times, and he wasn't going to pretend they hadn't happened. That's when I realized he didn't actually think they'd done anything wrong. He thought I was the problem for being upset about it. He thought I should just get over it and be grateful they were willing to include me now. I told him to leave and never come back. Update 3. It's been 6 months since I cut them off and 3 months since they found me and started their campaign to get me back. They've finally stopped showing up at my apartment, but they haven't stopped trying. They've enlisted other family members to reach out to me. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, all telling me that I need to forgive my family, that life is too short to hold grudges, that families fight, but they work through it. What they don't understand is that this wasn't a fight. This was 4 years of being systematically erased from my own family while being lied to about it. This was discovering that the people who raised me had built a life that functioned better without me in it. I've started therapy to work through it all. My therapist has helped me understand that what they did was a form of emotional abuse. They isolated me, gaslighted me about it, and then tried to make me feel like I was the problem for being upset about it. She's also helped me understand that their recent behavior, tracking me down, showing up uninvited, refusing to accept my boundaries, is a continuation of that abuse. They're still trying to control the narrative and make this about my reaction rather than their actions. Last week, I got a letter from my mom. She'd somehow found my work address and sent it there. In it, she told me that my dad had been diagnosed with early-stage cancer. She said the family needed to come together during this difficult time and that my absence was making everything harder for everyone. She said I was being selfish by staying away when my family needed me most. She said I was punishing my dad for something that wasn't even his fault and that I'd regret it if something happened to him while we were estranged. I felt guilty for about 10 minutes. Then I remembered the photos of them celebrating my birthday weekend without me while I sat alone in my apartment. I remembered my dad telling me I was overreacting and that he wasn't going to delete their good memories just because I was upset about being excluded from them. I remembered that this is exactly what abusive families do. They create a crisis and then blame you for not dropping everything to help them through it. They make their problems your fault and their healing your responsibility. I didn't respond to the letter. 2 days later, my sister called my work directly and somehow got transferred to my extension. She was crying again, telling me that Dad was scared and asking for me, that the whole family was falling apart without me, that I needed to come home. I told her that if Dad wanted to talk to me, he could call me himself and apologize for 4 years of exclusion and lies. I told her that if the family was falling apart, maybe they should have thought about that before they spent 4 years building a family that didn't include me. I told her that I wasn't responsible for fixing what they broke, and I wasn't going to set myself on fire to keep them warm. She said I'd changed, that I'd become cold and cruel, that the brother she knew would never abandon his family like this. I told her she was right. The brother she knew was gone. He died the day I found those photos and realized his family had been living a secret life without him for 4 years. What was left was someone who finally understood his worth and refused to accept scraps from people who had shown him exactly how little he meant to them. I hung up and blocked the work number. The truth is, I am different now. I'm not the person who used to beg for inclusion and accept whatever crumbs of attention my family was willing to throw my way. I'm not the person who made excuses for their behavior and blamed myself for not being good enough to deserve their love. I've built a new life in my new city. I've made friends who actually want me around. I've started dating someone who thinks I'm worth including in their plans. I've discovered what it feels like to be wanted instead of tolerated. My family had 4 years to include me, for years to be honest with me, for years to treat me like I mattered. Instead, they chose to exclude me and lie about it. They chose to build a family that worked better without me. Now they want me back because they're facing a crisis and they need someone to blame for their problems. They want me to forget 4 years of systematic exclusion because it's convenient for them now. But I remember what it felt like to see those photos. I remember the gut punch of realizing that my family was happier without me. I remember the humiliation of discovering that I'd been begging for inclusion in a family that had already decided I didn't belong. I remember, and I'm not going back. They made their choice 4 years ago. Now I'm making mine. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some trust, once broken, can't be repaired. Some families, once they show you who they really are, don't deserve a second chance. I'm finally free, and I'm not giving that up for people who had to lose me to realize they wanted me. They can keep their photos and their memories of their perfect little family of 3. I'm building something better without them.